You ever wonder why we're here? It's one of life's great mysteries, isn't it?
I wanted to take a moment to talk about the finale of Red vs. Blue, the final season, season 19, Restoration, I believe, and just talk about the show as a whole, because I grew up with Red vs. Blue, and if you're not familiar with this show, it was a machinima. It was a story being told in the video game engine, and machinimas were very popular back in the day, but Red vs. Blue was one of the uniquely most popular ones, and it was a very elegant blend of video game humor and military humor. It just had some very, very well done writing, and even going back years later, it still makes me laugh. It still holds up very well. And for some people, the first 5 seasons was all they watched, and they may not have even known that there were more seasons afterwards. I know it took me a while to find out that there were more episodes, so I did eventually find seasons 6 through 8, and I think those became my favorite seasons. It was still that blend of military humor and video game humor, but now with a bit of a more mature storyline and a lot more action set pieces. They did more stuff than just in-game machinima. They did actual source filmmaker style unique animations, and they started implementing really intense action scenes, and it's very exciting. And then seasons 9 and 10, they leaned a bit more into the action-heavy side, and that's fine. I think these 2 seasons are really good still. But instead of having the action and the comedy mixed together, these seasons were trying to tell 2 different storylines, one of them comedy, one of them action, and they were kept largely separate. And, you know, it's fine, it's good, I enjoy it still, but it's not quite the blend that I really enjoyed from the previous seasons. And then seasons 11 through 13 were a return to form, really. Maybe not as good as seasons 6 through 8, but seasons 11 through 13 told their own story, and it was serious, and it was funny, and it was really well done. And the way it ended just kind of felt like the closest I could hope for a finale. It was just beautiful, but also kind of sad. But the series didn't end there. There was a 14th season, and that was kind of an experimental season, and that was fine enough. And then season 15 came out, and the writing started to get a bit too much for me. I can usually forgive silly writing, but I really didn't understand what was going on most of the time, and the whole gods thing. I don't even remember most of season 15. All I remember is that it didn't really grab my attention, and I really just didn't care. The series felt to me like it had perhaps gone on too long. They were jumping the shark and doing these strange storylines that, even for Red vs. Blue, which was already kind of like a little eccentric cartoon, they didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, and I really just stopped caring. And every once in a while, I'd remember that Red vs. Blue was still coming out with new episodes, so I'd check out, for example, season 17. Let's see what they're doing this season. And I wouldn't like what I saw. It continued to not be the show I wanted to see, and so I just stopped watching. But personally, I was really looking forward to this final season because of the amount of time I've spent with the series. I love going back to those original few seasons, the first 13 seasons, and watching my favorite moments, or just kind of watching the entire season, because it still holds up surprisingly well all these years later. And these days, I'm honestly just happy that a series can actually have closure, because I've seen a lot of series that perhaps go on a bit too long and don't end where they should, or series that are cut out from beneath them, cut off at the knees before they really have a chance to shine, or at the very least, wrap things up in a tidy little package. So I was really looking forward to this final season, and in my opinion, I believe this is a faithful closure to the series. I don't think it's perfect, and I'll get into the details why, but I do really like that we got a final season for this amazing show from a company that, I'm not going to get into it, but the company's been through some rough patches. It's been quite tumultuous. I'm happy that through all of it, we were able to get a final season that really wraps things up in a way that really works. And so I'm going to talk about it now. I'm going to start spoiling the final season. So if you do want to go watch it without being spoiled first, I'm sure you could find it. But yeah, I watched the final season and I am inspired to talk about it just because of how much I really enjoy the series and how much it means to me and how happy I am that this final season exists. This new season starts off taking place at a Comic-Con, a convention of sorts, and it really doesn't feel like I'm watching Red vs. Blue when it starts. I was very off-put by it, and I was very confused to see if I had actually clicked on the right show, or if I was even on the right season. Because again, I hadn't seen the previous seasons, because they felt so jarring, and I started watching this season, and this felt jarring, so I thought maybe I had accidentally clicked on the wrong season. But apparently this is how it begins, and it's okay, but it's not a very strong start. But not long after that, we get back to Blood Gulch with the Reds, the three Reds that are there, and Caboose, who is the lone remaining Blue. And also, I guess, Lopez is there, but Lopez only has about 5 minutes of screen time. Like, I realize Lopez isn't one of the main characters, but still, he was a persistent character throughout the entire series, so it seems weird that you would bring him back for 5 minutes and then not do anything with him. But I suppose it doesn't bother me too much. He has some funny banter with Caboose. Apparently, Caboose always being able to speak Spanish but never actually doing it. That's a fun twist. That's a fun way to do things. I really enjoyed these scenes. And again, I don't want to sound too nitpicky because, again, I really do like this final season and it gives me the closure that I wanted. But there are still some moments that feel off, like maybe this could have been done a bit better. Maybe I wouldn't have made these choices specifically. And that's just me personally. I didn't have a huge attachment to Lopez as a character, but there might be some people out there who did and may have wanted a bit more closure with him. Anyway, the show really starts to get going when Caboose comes over and lets the Reds know that he got a final message from Church, the bottom line being that Church is dead and Tucker is in trouble, so Caboose wants the Reds to help. And the Reds do not seem too interested in helping. They very clearly turn their back on him, which is a little surprising. Over the last few seasons, it really feels like they had a bit more of a bond, something that wouldn't be that easily broken. I think back to all the different final stands they had, these big dramatic poses where they set aside their differences and now they're working together, and now that Caboose is asking for help, they're just not interested. And I can kind of expect it from Sarge since he's stuck in his ways, and I can also expect it from Griff since he's kind of an asshole who's eager to not do anything. But I honestly was surprised that Simmons was so quick to turn his back on Caboose. And he does eventually start petitioning the other members of the Red team to help, but it just seemed a little too heartless, a little too cruel to Caboose, who's already suffered so much. From a viewer's perspective, you really can't help but feel sad for Caboose, because he's gone through a lot. As the story progresses, we do get a couple of B stories. We see Wash and Doc. If you're not familiar with Wash, he's from seasons 6 onward, some of the later seasons. So Wash and Doc are talking and dealing with various issues, trying to get Wash out of this mental asylum, I think it is, or something similar to that. Wash realizes there's a threat, and Doc is trying to help him out and try and help Wash escape, and that's all fine. I think this is done well. I think there's nothing wrong with this. We also get glimpses into how Tucker and the Meta are struggling with each other. Mostly Tucker struggling to, try to not be evil, but the Meta is incredibly powerful, so yeah, there are some pretty dark scenes here. One dark scene. It's just the one really dark scene. Yeah, it's a shame that Tucker didn't get a whole lot of character development in this season, but I'm totally fine with that because it does feel like in seasons 11 through 13, he almost was the main character. It feels like he was one of the biggest players in those 3 seasons. So him not getting the limelight in this season, I'm quite happy with. Anyway, the Caboose and the Reds return to where season 13 ended, the physical location at the very end of season 13. But then Meta Tucker shows up, and he's very, very scary, very dominating, and causes the Reds to flee, which, again, I understand self-preservation, but like you're abandoning Caboose, and you've been through a lot, and this feels like the second time you just kind of ditched Caboose, and I just feel for the guy, like he doesn't deserve that kind of treatment. But I do think it allows Caboose to get one great character moment here, probably his best character moment in the series finale.
Don't feel bad afterwards. I forgive you. I know it's not your fault.
And subsequently it allows Sarge to have his best moment, with a rather shocking turn of events. I didn't see this twist coming. And then everybody returns to Blood Gulch for the final battle, the final scene, and this plays out very well. The scene where Griff and Simmons and Caboose are just reminiscing around the campfire, talking about their favorite memories, the music crescendoing while it's showing some of my most favorite scenes, the most memorable scenes from the previous season. Yeah, that definitely tickles that nostalgia part of me. It makes me remember happier times and fonder memories. And finally, Meta Tucker shows up, and the final battle happens, and Tex shows up, and Carolina from some of the later seasons shows up, and then Wash drops in. The interactions with Doc and Wash are still as good as I remember. Those haven't skipped a beat. Perhaps my biggest criticism with how this finale is handled stems from how Simmons is handled in this final battle, this final confrontation. It starts off with him not really knowing how to use the shotgun he was given, and then in a few minutes, he's reloading it one-handed like the Terminator from Terminator 2. It just feels like an unearned badass moment, and completely unnecessary too, because a few moments prior to this, he had his arm broken, or at least badly damaged. So just simply working through the pain to reload his gun normally would have been badass in itself. You didn't have to go over the top with this cinematic Hollywood kind of thing. It just didn't really feel in character, I suppose. And then a few minutes later, the fate of this fight hinges on whether or not he can throw an item really far. And he does, and it's a very impressive throw, which is strange because it's never been hinted at that he might be athletic in any sense. In fact, based on everything we know about him, he shouldn't. He shouldn't be able to throw as good as he does, so it's weird that he's inspired by his memory of Sarge telling him he would be a good leader to throw something really far. Maybe that's what he believes a good leader can do. This whole thing just doesn't feel right. And I think the biggest reason it doesn't feel right is because I think this scene was meant for Donut. That's how it feels to me, at least. It feels like at the last minute, they wrote Donut out of the script largely. Because if Donut were still with the group, if Donut were still hanging out with Griff and Simmons, this would be his moment to shine. If you remember one thing about Donut, aside from his effeminate eccentricities, it's that one scene in which he threw a grenade really, really far.
Hey, bitch! Remember me? I did something for you!
Man, that girl's got a really good arm.
That seems like the kind of activity he should be doing. If the fate of the world hinges on being able to throw something really far, Donut should be there doing it. It seems very odd to me, so very odd, that all these other characters are getting some closure, some sense of finality, and yet Donut just doesn't. Why? Why not include him? If specifically this scene fits for him so well, why? Anyway, the fight plays out, Meta Tucker is defeated, and then the series ends on a rather bittersweet note, where Griff leaves, and Simmons stays, and they say goodbye to each other. And it's sad, but that's kind of great. Like, there's no way to not feel sad about Red versus Blue ending, so the fact that it ends on kind of a bittersweet note is very fitting. And there's a conversation that plays out between Wash and Carolina where we, the audience, learn that Doc isn't really there. Wash and Doc haven't been talking to each other. Wash has been hallucinating. Based on some prior traumas he's had previously, he's just imagining himself talking to Doc to give himself some sense of peace. Doc apparently died. in that final battle of the Chorus trilogy, apparently not everyone survived that final battle. Doc died. And that was kind of a shocking twist, but I think they pulled it off very well. Everything about this final season worked very well for me, but the biggest hill for me to get over was just how they just didn't handle Donut well. I honestly would have loved for him to show up at the final battle, the way that so many of the other characters also show up. Here's Wash and Doc and Carolina and Tex, like they're all here. And for some reason now also Donut is here, so Donut can have his time to shine. That would be nice. Or if you didn't want to include Donut, if you wanted to keep the focus squarely on the smaller group, then maybe it should be implied that he died along with Doc at the end of the Chorus trilogy. It might be a kick in the teeth for people that really like Donut's character to learn that he just died off screen at the end of season 13, but that's a noble way to go out, and it would explain his absence for the entire thing. It would have also given a reason for the rest of Red Team to be so sad and bitter at the very beginning of the series, because if they watched Donut die in the final battle trying to help out the Blues, then yeah, it would make a lot more sense why they wouldn't want to help Caboose again. Like, that would actually be better motivation for why they're behaving the way they're behaving. But that's not the direction they chose to go for whatever reason. I don't know the specifics on why they chose to do it that way. The series finale is what it is, and honestly, I still really enjoy it, even if I think that it could have been done a little bit better. I'm really happy with how this series has ended, and I'm happy that this final chapter really wraps things up in possibly the best way it could. Again, there could be some small improvements here and there, but a lot of closure, a lot of finality. I'm really happy to have enjoyed Red vs. Blue over the years, for it to have been such an influential part of my younger life, and I wish the creators the best in whatever project they choose to pursue in the future. I'm just really happy with a lot of what I've gotten out of Red vs. Blue, and I've gotten a lot. And I know the spirit of Red vs. Blue will live on with the people that they've influenced over the years. A lot of us draw our inspiration from this series, and it's affected us, so Red vs. Blue will continue to exist in some form, and that's great. I love to see what people do to take these video game characters, not even necessarily Halo characters, but just all these characters, and just have fun with them. Just make lighthearted jokes, tell their own stories using that's what we're doing, right? It's us just living in a video game and telling our own story within it. Hey.
Yeah?
You ever wonder why we're here?
It's one of life's great mysteries, isn't it? Why are we here? On a space station. In space.